if you are brand new to embroidery, you've never held a hoop in your hand, you don't know what to do with a needle, you're absolutely clueless, this is for you. Welcome. If you do know what you're doing, what are you doing here? Get out of here. Go stitch something. So I'm just going to follow along here and give some visual demonstration to hopefully make you feel a little bit more comfortable so you can dive in and enjoy some hand embroidery. All right, so first, back up, where do you buy this stuff? You can go to your local craft store, big box or otherwise. You can find a lot of this stuff online. I do sell some stuff in my shop. There's lots of great options out there. So if you can't find something, you can shoot me an email and I can help you locate something. All right? Perfect. Okay, so hoops. We have different options for materials. You can actually find metal hoops. I got this at the thrift store, also a good place to find supplies sometimes. I actually don't use these, but I thought it was cool. This is a plastic hoop. I'm not a big fan of these. I find that the fabric slips when I use these. There are fancier versions with a groove in them that can help with your tension. Also an option. I tend to use just the cheap wooden hoops from the craft stores. They're only a couple dollars. So the price is right. Problem is sometimes you get what you pay for. Quality has kind of gone down a little bit. You can see there's some splintering here. You may need to just sand your hoop. Another thing is sometimes the tension isn't great on the larger hoops, but there are things you can do. You can do this very homemade looking thing here. I actually just wrapped scraps of fabric around the inside of my hoop here. Lovely, right? Looks like a mummy hoop or something. And what that does is it gives you better tension so that when you have your fabric sandwiched in here, you're going to have a snugger fit. All right, so that way you can get your fabric drum tight on your hoop, which is what you want. Another nice thing about these cheaper hoops is they are easy to decorate. If you want to do a wood stain, that's what I did here, a wood stain and a varnish. I just painted it on. You can do all kinds of fun things for framing. Basically what I like to do now, since I've been introduced to these fancier hoops, I have like a favorite stitching hoop, which is this one. This is higher quality. You can see here that the metal parts are obviously a lot nicer quality. Over here you can see there's notches. You can use a screwdriver to tighten this. We don't have any splinters anywhere on this guy. And it just has a nicer fit. This is also a similar hoop, but it's a lot thicker. I find this is too heavy in my hands. I can really feel the weight. So still a nice hoop, but this is my preferred friend. So I will stitch in something like this that I reuse for every project, and then use one of these cheaper ones to decorate and actually frame my hoop in. So when I'm done with some work, I either will trim and glue back my fabric, like in this one, and then you can hang by a nail right here just on your wall. Okay, so that's one option. And then another option is cinching the back using a running stitch, and then I just tied a knot, and in order to hang it, I tied this ribbon on top, which I then used a couple stitches right here to secure. So then this can be hung from your tree or your wall or whatever. So, and here you can also see I decorated this hoop. So, a couple options. I do have a tutorial on my website with more information about that. Oh, twill tape is another option for binding your hoop. That's what that's called, to give a more snug fit. Excellent. I think that's all I want to say about hoops right now. So next is fabric. Here's some fabric. So for beginners, I usually recommend just using like a quilting cotton. I just have a couple scraps here that I pulled out. They're all crazy, falling apart. But just to show you, there's like fun colors. It's not like crazy stretchy. This is linen, so, well, it's a linen blend, so it has a little bit more give to it. It's a little more fun. You have a little more texture, but it can be a little bit harder to stitch. This one has glitter in it, which is magical. You can get like a true linen, which is used oftentimes in cross stitch. It's going to be harder to use because there's basically like a grid you have to conform to. There's specific holes in the fabric. For me, I find it harder to use. With a cotton, it's just a flat surface and you can stick your needle in here wherever. You might want to avoid at the beginning stitching in any kind of like stretchy fabric, like you had a t-shirt you wanted to stitch on. The problem is with that stretchiness, you can get warping of your fabric when you're doing your stitches if you're not super careful. You'd probably want to use a stabilizer if you're going to be doing any clothing, any stitching on any clothing. So we'll save that for another video, but just something to be cautious of. All right, now let's look at, yay, some floss. So I think the floss is the funnest part. So if you go to the store, you're probably going to see a bunch of these. The DMC, this is 6-stranded embroidery floss. You know what the number is here. That's how you know which one to get. And yeah, it comes in hundreds of colors, and it's pretty affordable and easy to find in the United States. You pull it from one end. There's 6 individual strands. Your pattern should tell you how many strands to use. I'll talk more about that when I'm kind of getting started here. But just a little bit more about floss. Some people like to keep their floss organized by using bobbins. You can also use those plastic trays, keep them all organized like that. What happens is after you've used your floss for a little while, it gets skinnier, right? Because it's gone. So one of these will fall off and then it gets skinnier and skinnier, and then you don't know what color this is anymore. So it's nice to have them wound like this if you have the time to do it to help keep you organized. So there's other brands. This is Lacey and Cosmo. I like to use that too. It feels a little softer. It's from Japan. Also, this 6-stranded cotton, you can get it variegated. So the color changes throughout the skein, whether it's in a monochromatic like this pink or these crazy rainbow colors here. Oh, this is also cotton, but it's on a spool. Sometimes you'll see that. That's also from Cosmo. Here we have some silk, which is just beautiful. There's some random silk. It's 12-stranded, actually, interestingly enough, and these are all hand-dyed. Gonna cost more money. I would definitely recommend starting here and then working this way to the more expensive stuff. It's like a luxury, you know. It feels really soft in your hands, and it's just really beautiful. So that's fun. And then there's like metallics, there's satin, there's all kinds of different materials you can get for thread. Again, start here, keep it simple. It's cheaper, it's easier to work with. This is more slippery. This is notoriously difficult to work with, this sparkly stuff. I know it's really pretty and it's easy to just go to the store and want to buy it. At least that's my experience. But wait and get some practice first with this easier stuff to use. All right, now we're on to needles. So for hand embroidery, you're basically going to want some embroidery needles. Easy enough, right? I recommend just grabbing a variety pack. There's lots of different brands. You can spend a little money, you can spend in between money, you can spend a lot of money. You know, you don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy hand embroidery. It's fun to treat yourself, so definitely do that if you want to. But if you're just starting out, you know, just find something easy at the store. There's going to be different sizes in a variety pack. You can also just get a pack of a single size, which I do not. Oh, here's a pack of 7s, for example. With a variety pack, you could try a bunch of different sizes. So 10s are actually these tiny ones, and then the 5s in this pack, the 5-7, or excuse me, 5-10. I can read, I promise. It's really confusing because they don't even tell you on here like how many of each. What set? Anyways, that's my own beef. Whatever. 10. 5. Okay, so it's backwards of what you would think. Here you can see I have either a 9 or a 10 here, and this is maybe a 5, maybe a 3, and then here's something in between. So I like to have, you know, a little bit of everything nearby. Like a full strand of floss would fit really easily through here. Maybe a single strand would fit through here, and then something in between here. Okay. People say, you know, what size needle should I use? I say, you know, use whichever one you can get away with comfortably. So if you can get a full strand through here, go for it. If you hate embroidery, trying to get a full strand through this eye, don't do it. You know, use a bigger eye like this. This should be enjoyable, not a frustrating experience. They have these needle threaders you can use. You stick them through the eye, like I swear they work like this, and then you can obviously stick your floss through here very easily and then pull it back through to thread a needle. That's always an option. So yeah, that's needles. Oh, and then here's some thimbles. I usually don't use them unless I'm stitching through a very thick fabric like a denim, but those are an option if your fingers are getting angry. Scissors is next. So having a nice pair of fabric scissors is lovely to have. And then you'll probably want something to cut your embroidery floss, or if you have some work you're doing and you have like a weird stray strand sticking up that you need to trim, it's nice to have a pair of really sharp scissors you can get in there and do some detail work. Something else that's nice to have would be some tweezers. It can help you pull back strands. You can buy like $20 embroidery scissors or $4 embroidery scissors and something in between. You know, you're going to get what you pay for once again. Like, these are cute and fun and maybe match your project. Also, I just want to show you these. I think these are fun. I have them on my keys because sometimes I do my stitching when I'm out and about, and I would hate to be trapped somewhere without my scissors. So it has these little grooves here you can use to cut like that. It's obviously not the best cut. It does better than me like gnawing through a piece of floss, but also good for on airplanes. I've used these too. I have never had my embroidery scissors confiscated though, just for the record. But I always like the backup because, like I said, I'd be really sad if I was staring at my embroidery work and didn't have any scissors to use. That would be devastating. All right, well, let me show you how to get started on a project. Okay, so before you get started, make sure you can see, all right? Seems obvious, but be in a place with some nice natural light. If you are stitching at night, which is a nice thing to do while watching TV, get yourself a good quality light so you can see what you're doing. It's your eyes will thank you. And sit comfortably. Like if you're at work, you want to make sure you're in a comfortable chair and that your back is straight, you're not all tweaked, and take breaks, okay? Take care of your body. It's the only one we've got. Okay, so just to show you like what's in a kit. Sticky cellophane, obviously. This is the free pattern and the kit you can get. The kit's not free, excuse me. Don't want to give that impression. I think I'd be pretty poor if I gave the supplies away for free. So it's going to have a hoop. Like I said, this is the cheap hoop. If you don't like stitching in it, invest in a nice hoop you can use over and over again, and then just use this to frame the finished work like this. All right. And then here's the 6-stranded embroidery floss. You can see the numbers match up with the diagram here, so okay, 920 goes here and here. All right, that's how that works. Business card, I think you know how that works. If you have any questions, please give me an email. Okay, here we have a couple of needles that come with the kit. And then the fabric. So with this kit, it has pre-printed fabric, which is great. You don't have to worry about transferring the design. If you do want to do the design again later, there are printouts here. Here you can actually probably see pretty well on this white fabric how you can actually just see through it and trace. So that's basically the easiest way, I think, to get a design to your fabric is to trace. With white fabric, it's obviously going to be a lot easier. If you have a darker fabric or an opaque fabric, You might still be able to hold it up to a bright window or use a computer screen or a light board to trace. If not, you would have to use either like an iron transfer or stabilizer. Please check out my tutorial. It goes over lots of different transfer techniques. Okay, so when you have a pattern, it's going to tell you information, so you should read it. It says to use a full strand of embroidery floss, good information to have, but at any time you could always use fewer strands if you don't want such a thick line. Okay, down here it tells you, what stitch to use where and which color to use where. For this pattern, I have the video tutorial you can follow along with, but I don't mention here like what order to do the stitches. And I guess I should, just to give you guys a little bit more information, but for something like this, honestly, you can start wherever. But I can see how that might be overwhelming if you've never started before. So you can just make it up if you want. Just start in one place and go, clockwise, or use your favorite color first, or whatever. So if I don't have that information here, it's because, stitcher's choice. Okay, so what now? Let's hoop up. Okay, so I'm not actually going to do this pattern. You can watch that video tutorial if you like. Let's see. Here's some fabric. So your embroidery hoop, you're obviously going to unscrew it like this to loosen it, and then you have your top and your bottom. So I don't usually wash my fabric, and I obviously don't iron it either. For projects like this, I really don't think it matters. Plus, it kind of works as a key for me. So when I make my little hoop sandwich here, I'm going to tighten up here as much as I can. And then I'm going to work around clockwise, pulling and pulling and pulling, 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 all the way back to the top. And you can barely see those creases. All right, so I'm going to do that again. Tighten, tighten. Okay, and make sure sometimes when you tighten like that, the hoops will get a little uneven, so I kind of press them back together. And then go around again. Excellent. Those creases are pretty much gone. So that's how I know my fabric is tight enough in my hoop. Plus it's, we call it drum tight, right? Because I guess you could start a band. I don't know. Okay, so there we go. Now, how much fabric do you actually need? Like if you get a kit, you get what you get. But if you're going to the store, like how much do you actually need for your project? Well, if you're just gonna stitch in here and finish in this hoop, you really don't need much. This is probably too much for a hoop this size. If you're stitching, you might actually get these corners like folded over, and then you could accidentally start stitching them onto itself. I've actually done that with like when I'm wearing hoodies, the drawstring ties. I've actually stitched my clothing to my embroidery work. Not recommended. Be aware. So in this case, I'm just going to trim here because I don't need all this excess. And again, it doesn't have to look pretty because in the end, I'm going to trim it even more and just glue it back or whatever. You don't want to trim too close because then, let's say this gets loose, you want to leave enough so that you can grab it comfortably and tighten it. And that's just scrap. Okay, if you want to do something else with this work when you're done, like make a pillow, you got to plan ahead and have like a bigger piece of fabric, right? In that case, if you have that excess fabric, you could always use safety pins or something, like roll back the excess so you don't have to worry about stitching onto those extra folds. All right, so, excuse me. Let's see, I had a pencil a second ago. Here it is. So, if you wanted to do your tracing, I'll just actually trace a J on here. That's what that would look like. Like I said, I'm not going to do a full tutorial here. on tracing and stuff, but you can see, you can stitch on this side or on this side. It doesn't matter. When you finish it, you probably, if you were stitching on this side, you'd probably want to flip it, right? Rather than finish it like that. But you can also see I have a backwards J here. That was just to demonstrate that really quick. I'm not actually stitching a J. I don't know what I'm stitching. All right, but let me just show you here. So when I grab some floss, I take about 18 inches, 2 feet. Some people go from like the tip of the finger to the elbow. I usually have a little bit more than that. Okay, so to actually get the floss through the eye of the needle, I lick to kind of help get any frayed ends kind of glued together with saliva. Lovely. And then take a deep breath and just stick it through like that. Okay, so this is a nice big eye needle, so it's not too challenging. And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to tie a knot at the other end. Some people would send me to embroidery jail for doing this, but I think it's okay. You don't want a huge crazy tail because I mean, you just don't need it, right? Okay. So then I'm just gonna stitch. Just play. Like if you have some spare fabric, you can just use like an old pillowcase or something and just play. I'm just gonna do some running stitch here because it's real easy. Just to get comfortable. Just going up and down and up and down. So you can see as I stitch, I have this tail here. And like, let's say I have my tail really long like that. In the next couple stitches, I'm going to start stitching with it, right? Which I don't want. I'm just trying to stitch with a single strand here. Let's see how I have my tail stuck in here. I don't want that. So as I go, I need to be mindful and kind of move my needle along here so that as I go, this tail gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, okay? So I'm stitching, say I do some back stitch. What's going on back here? Oh, I need to adjust again already. So one thing I'm doing is I'm making sure that my stitches aren't too tight and that they're not too loose. Okay, so if I made my stitches too tight, see how it like puckers the fabric? So my fabric's really tight on here, so it's kind of hard to do. But if my fabric was looser here and I pulled, basically I would cinch this, right? And I would get warping and wrinkles in my fabric. Don't want that. I also don't want this too loose, right? Too loose. Don't want that. Also on the back, we wouldn't want too loose, all right? So basically, my stitches and my floss are laying at the same tension as my fabric. And that's just, honestly, it's going to take time and practice to really get that right. A lot of my first pieces had warping, especially if you get a lot of heavy stitches in there, like satin stitch and long and short stitch, where you have lots and lots and lots of stitches. That's a thing that can happen. So just be aware, you know, if you're pulling really tight, maybe take some deep breaths, cut back on the coffee, do some meditation, and then come back. So this is just some chain stitch. I'm just trying to use up some of this floss here. So here I'm having to move my tail again as I go. Alright, so let's say I don't want this color anymore. What do I do? Or let's say I only have this much left. You know, once we get down to the end here, you need to finish off your floss before it gets too low. What did I do here? So here I had like a weird loose thing. So this would be bad. Do not do that. So what I'm going to do is weave in my tail like this. Just a couple weaves. Maybe switch direction. Okay, and then just trim it. If you want, you can also tie a little knot instead, really close. I find that very difficult to do though. So that should be okay. I mean, if you're working on clothing or jewelry or a patch, you may need to be a little bit more rigid with your anchoring techniques. But if this is just going to be decorative on a wall, your stitches are going to hold unless you have someone coming up to your work and like with some tweezers trying to pull out your stitches, in which case like you have some weird friends, you know, like I don't know why anyone would do that. All right, so that is just, you know, basic stitching and getting your needle flossed up and anchoring. Another little tip here, let's say you don't have a giant eyed needle like this, you only have this size and you're having a hard time. I'll show you two tricks here for this. So, all right, let me just get some floss, because I didn't show you how to separate the thread either, so this is a good way to do that. So let's say you need to just use 3 strands. So the best way to separate floss is just to grab one little strand at a time. It gets confusing because this is a strand, but it's made of 6 strands. Sometimes I call them ply to kind of differentiate. So there's a single ply, and then left over here I have 5. There's 2. And then 3. Okay, so then you can just join them back up to make 3. And also something cool you can do is you could always rejoin different colors too for a different look. Alright, so here's my 3. And when I rejoin them, you can see it's kind of like, I don't have them even, and one of them's kind of frayed. Actually, each one is made of 2 tiny threads spiraled together. So I'm going to lick this, trim it, and then go through this smaller needle. There we go. So if I was to stitch like this, do my little knot, so here's just stitching with 3 strands. You can see that they're skinnier, right? They're half. All right, cool. So, but here's my trick. So let's say, I'm just gonna cut this off. Let's say you actually need to be stitching with 6 strands. What you can do, if you're having a hard time threading your needle, is take 3 strands, thread the 3 strands, and then double them over, okay? And then tie them at the back here. Oops. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden I am butterfingers here. All right. So now when I stitch like this with it doubled over, I'm back to a full ply, right? Or 6 again. Pretty sneaky, huh? So in this case, when I would anchor, could come back here and do my little tail weaving. It's up to you how many little weaves make you feel comfortable. So in this case, I definitely have to cut this to then free my needle like that. So to finish up, I just want to show a couple of other ways you can start some floss without using a knot. Like let's say I'm going to do a little leaf over here. I like these pens. These are air soluble pens. Pretty cool. All right, so this is another thing I like to do. So let's say we're going to make a little leaf here. So I will just use my finger on the back and just hold a little tail like this, okay? And then I'll start stitching. You can kind of see where I'm holding it. It's going to get covered by my stitches, okay? So it requires a little more thinking, which is why I don't necessarily suggest you start like this, but if you're feeling comfortable and you're doing a stitch that you know will cover an anchor, you can do this. So I'm just doing some fishbone here. And if we look on the back, you can see that I have already one stitch covering. I'm about to have another stitch covering. If you get little knots like that, those are just from your floss twisting. You can kind of just tease them out like I did and then pull through again. If you get a really bad knot and you have no idea that teasing isn't working, you may just need to get in there with the scissors and kind of start that little section over again. All right, so here you can see, here's my tail, and it got tacked down by those stitches. All right, and then in this case, you could also trim this as well. So let's say I finished, I can go here and weave this tail in, and then trim these tails like that. Okay, and so then let's say I was going to start something else. I could also, instead of doing a knot or worrying about weaving my tail under my stitches as I go, I could weave under here these stitches that I already have. All right, so like I said, I do like 2 or 3 depending on where I am. And you don't want to pull like crazy tight, you know, just have it secure, and then you can start stitching. That works pretty well if I'm going to be doing stitches close to here. They talk about like carrying. You wouldn't want to like be here and then carry way to the other side of the hoop. And maybe it wouldn't be so bad in this case because my hoop is only 4 inches. But if you have like an 8-inch hoop, like carrying your floss from one end all the way 8 inches to the other end, you're going to have this long string. And, you know, is that bad or is that good? It can be okay. One thing that could happen is if you have a kind of a thinner fabric and a darker floss, you may be able to see that strand being carried all the way across. Another thing that could happen is you could have it there and then you could have other stitches kind of start to pull on it, which would then cause warping of your fabric. So, I don't know, the backs of my hoops obviously are not amazingly gorgeous, which I don't worry about as long as it's not interfering with how the front of my work looks. Okay, again, someone may send me to embroidery jail for that, but that's the rule of thumb that I currently live by. So here's one more option. So here's a little knot. And let's say I want to do something right here. I'll do satin stitch in a little circle. You would want to start a good enough distance away that with what floss you have created, this tail that you're going to create is long enough to get on your needle and weave. So I'm going to start way over here to give myself plenty. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to stitch a circle. If I have enough floss on here. After this, when you're ready to start learning stitches, please go check out those videos. There's a directory where you can just watch the videos for specific stitches, or you can watch the video for the, oh my gosh, this is so ugly. For me, it's hard to talk and concentrate on stitching at the same time. It was supposed to be a circle. I'm not really sure what shape it is now, but it's gonna work for what we're doing here. It's a blob. Or you can watch the tutorial for that sampler and learn all those stitches. You can kind of skip around and learn what you want. Anyways, check out the website. There's a lot of different tutorials you can watch depending on what you want to learn. All right. Here's my ugly blue circle. I didn't stick to my guidelines at all. I was like, why did I even bother? Okay, so I'm gonna weave this tail in like this and trim. And then check this out. I'm gonna cut this, and now I'm gonna put this tail on my needle and then weave this. Awesome. So that's like another way you can anchor your ends. So you anchor the start and the end at the end. Kind of cool. All right, that's it. Go have fun. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I would be happy to help you.